Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishna Kesubos, Parak Test, Chapter 9, Mishna Test, Mishna 9. We began this Mishnah before Yom Kippur, and we'll just read through the beginning quickly and finish up from where we left off. Hatzia get Beni Ksuba, if she produced a bill of divorce without a ksuba, as we said, this is talking about in a situation in a place where they don't write a ksuba. Goyve ksubasa, she collects her ksuba by producing her get, her bill of divorce. Ksuba Beni get, in the same place where she produces a ksuba. Her husband decided to write her ksuba, and she doesn't have a get with her. He oimeres avad giti. She says, I lost my get. V'hu oimer, he says, avad shayvari, I lost my receipt. Same case of a lender who produces an IOU. Ve'eni my prisbol, but it's a Shemitah year, and he doesn't produce a prisbol to show that to show that he did something to make sure that Shemitah should not cancel his debt. In these cases, they will not be paid. Shmuel Gamliel says, from the time of danger and on, meaning when the ruling government of Eretz Yisrael forbade the practice of the Torah, then when they would write a get or write a prisbol, they would do what they had to do immediately and then burn it up. So in these cases, there's no expectation to produce these documents, and therefore, at that point and onwards, Isha Gavik Ksubasa Shaloi Beget, a woman could collect her ksuba even without producing a get, and a lender could collect without a prisbol. And again, in the case of the ksuba, we're talking about where this is a place where they don't actually write a ksuba, but in a place where they do actually write a ksuba, I guess Shmuel Gamliel may have been the same. It doesn't necessarily talk about it in those circumstances, but in a situation where they do write a ksuba, then she has to produce the ksuba. She's expected to be able to produce it. And I guess according to Shmuel Gamliel, he would have said that from the time of danger, I'm assuming they'd probably burn up a ksuba also. And therefore, even then, she wouldn't have to produce it. But he doesn't talk about that specific case. All right, now we pick up from where we left off last. Shnei git in shtei ksubas. Now here we're going to be talking about where a woman is in a situation where there's a question here of possibly collecting two ksubas. All right, so we have a number of cases like that. The first case is Shnei git in shtei ksubas. She produces two bills of divorce with two ksubas. Now what's going on here? So what's going on here is that the bills of divorce means she was married to so-and-so once, he divorced her, and then he remarried her, and he divorced her. And each time that he remarried her, he wrote a separate ksuba. He actually wrote a separate ksuba. There's a ksuba from the first marriage, there's a ksuba from the second marriage. That's what he wrote. He wrote two ksubas after each marriage. So says the Mishnah, goyvish te ksubas. At that point, she has the right to collect both ksubas. He went ahead, he married her, he divorced her. Each time that he married her, he wrote her a ksuba, including the second time. That means that he obligated himself to a second ksuba for the second marriage. And therefore, she has a right to collect two ksubas. Now, shtei ksubas v'get echad. She produces two ksubas and one get. Now, what does that mean? That means that she was married to this man. He wrote her, shtei ksubas v'get echad, two ksubas and one get, means that she was married to this man, he divorced her, and what did he do while they were married? He wrote her two ksubas. He wrote her two ksubas. Now we'll talk about that soon, what that means, and what's exactly the meaning, what's going to be the halach in that case. Or let's say she produces a ksuba with two gets. Now in that case, where she's going ahead and producing two gittin with one ksuba, now what that means is that clearly she's talking about two gittin. That means she was married to this guy more than once. And the case is she was married to him, he wrote her a ksuba, he divorced her, he remarried her again, and then he divorced her, but he only wrote one ksuba after the first marriage. That's all he did. The last case is a ksuba, the get, umisa. Instead of two gittin, the case is she produces a ksuba, she produces a get, a bill of divorce, and she proves that he died. So again, she was married to this person twice, and he wrote her a ksuba after the first one, for the first marriage, he wrote her a ksuba. He did not write her a separate ksuba for the second marriage, and either the second time around, and either he gave her a get from the second marriage, or he died. Says the Mishnah, Eina goive ela ksuba achas. All she can do is collect one ksuba. Shemegarish ishtoi v'chzira. For someone who divorces his wife and takes her back, amanas ksuba rishona machazira. He takes her back with the intention of working with the first ksuba. So now we need to go through the cases here because the Mishnah is actually missing a little bit in the explanation. Now, if you take the first case of, let's say, let's say take the first case of, let's say, where the situation was, let me get my bearings here. The case was 2 ksubis and 1 get. Yeah, 2 ksubis and 1 get. So in that situation, we said they were married once, right? They were married. He divorced her. I'm sorry. No, they were married and he divorced her. But she produces 2 ksubis. 2 ksubis that were written while they were married. He wrote her 2 ksubis. Now, what did he do when he wrote her the 2 ksubis? What he actually did was like this. What he actually did was he wrote her 1 ksuba in the beginning of the marriage. Then later on in the marriage, he wrote her another ksuba. What did it say in the second ksuba? It actually said in the second ksuba, more money than the first. That's what he did. The second ksuba, he had more. He promised her more money than the first. But now he divorces her. So now there are 2 ksubas. Now again, in the very first case of the Mishnah, we're talking about that each time he remarried her, he wrote her a separate ksuba. This case is that while they're married, he wrote her 2 ksubas. Now the point is that the first ksuba, he didn't promise her as much money as the second ksuba. Now when he wrote these 2 ksubas, what was his intention? She should use both? No. The Mishnah means to say she only collects 1 ksuba means his intention was whichever one you want, that's what you can use. Now, what's the benefit of the first one over the second one? The second one's benefit is obvious. There's more money involved. But what's the benefit of the first one? The answer is the benefit of the first one is the following. We have learned previously that if a woman comes to collect her ksuba, let's say after divorce, and the man has nothing to collect from, he has no property or anything to collect from, and he had sold property during their marriage, she can now go to the buyer and take the land away from them because all his land while they were married was pledged toward the ksuba. Okay, now, if your ksuba, the earlier your ksuba is written, then that means the more time is included in the pledge because you can only collect from a buyer because it was pledged during the lifetime for what was sold after the document was written. After the ksuba is written, from that time on, we say things are pledged to the point that if he sells it, you can go ahead and collect, and you can take it. She can go ahead and collect it from the buyer. But that's only from the time of the ksuba onwards. So the earlier the ksuba, the more chances the wife has for the properties that he sells to be able to collect from them. If you work with a later time ksuba, you're going to have less of a time where the land that was sold she can collect from, because the pledge only works from the point of the time the ksuba is written from. So the first ksuba has the advantage that because it's dated earlier, it was written earlier, she has more possibilities of being able to go to buyers to collect her ksuba from there. The benefit of the second one is there's more money involved, more money promised, less chances of less opportunities to be able to collect from a buyer, but more money involved. So in that case where he wrote her 2 ksubis during their one marriage, his point was, you choose what you want. You choose which ksuba you want to work with. You want to work with the ksuba that gives you more opportunity to collect from the buyer? Go with that. You want the ksuba that gives you more money at right now? Go for that. But there was no intention there of being able to collect both ksubas. That's that case. But then we have the other cases, which were basically a case where we understand that they were married twice, but he only wrote her 1 ksuba. That means they were married, he wrote her a ksuba, they divorced, and they married again, and then they divorced or he died. That's a case of being married twice to the same person, but only 1 ksuba that was written after the first time. Says the Mishnah, in that case, that's what the last line of the Mishnah means. The last line of the Mishnah says the one who divorces his wife and takes her back, it's on the condition of the first ksuba he's taking her back. That means if he doesn't write a second ksuba, then his intention is we're going back to the first one. And therefore, since that is his intention when he remarries her, therefore there's only one ksuba that's going to be paid. Then the Mishnah concludes, Katan Shisiya Aviv, a very interesting situation where a minor, a boy, is married off by his father. Now we know, according to Torah law, that a girl who is a minor, or a girl until she is through being a naira, she, according to Torah law, be married off by her father. There is no Torah law like that when it comes to a minor, to a boy. Nonetheless, there is a concept midrabban, according to rabbinic law, where Katan Shesiya Aviv, his father married him off, and the halacha is if he marries her off, and they stay married after his bar mitzvah, then the halacha is that. So the Mishnah is like saying like this: Katan Shesiya Aviv, a katan that his father married him off. Kesubos kayemes. Her ksuba remains, shamanas ken kaima, because that was the intention, that was the condition upon which he kept her. Meaning, you've got this katan, he's married to this woman. According to Torah law, he's not married, but they're somewhat married, I guess. Now the halacha is that if by 13 they decide they're going to stay together, then the marriage can become a full-fledged marriage. He wrote her a ksuba when they were married, when he was still a minor. Now, at that point of time, he can't make a commitment. He's a minor. He's under bar mitzvah. He may be somewhat married with Rabbanan. I'm not really sure.
Who wrote the Kesuba?
Whoever wrote the Kesuba, whoever wrote it. The point is, though, but it's a commitment on the point. It's not the father's commitment. It's the husband's commitment. It's the boy's commitment. Mm-hmm. And when he made that commitment, he really couldn't make a commitment because he was a minor. So now when they get really married, okay, what do we say? Does he have to do a new ksuba, or can he work with that old ksuba? Says the Mishnah, you work with the old ksuba, because the intent involved in staying married is we're working with what we had before. Next case, Gerish Niskara v'ishta imay. A person converts with his wife, and he wrote her a ksuba. Now, there's no law of a ksuba in that case by non-Jews, but that's what he did. Before they converted, he wrote her a type of a ksuba. He made her a promise that in case he dies before her or he divorces her, that she's entitled to X amount of money. So in the case, that was what they made up before they converted. Now, Gersh Niskara v'ishta imay, a ger, a person who converted, and his wife converted with him, ksubasa kayemes. Here too, their original deal, their ksuba, the original deal, that's what stands. That's the actual halachic ksuba now. Shamanas ken kaima, because again, that was his intent. His intent was that when they converted, which means now he's going to marry her according to Torah law, that now, and with all its ramifications, nonetheless, being in this case here, we also say that the understanding was that when he married her, that they would be continuing with what they made up before, and that's how the ksuba continues even after the marriage according to Torah law. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.